War Horse by Michael Morpurgo. Part 1. Joey and Albert were like brothers. Joey might have been a young farm horse and Albert a young lad, but those two, they loved one another like brothers. More maybe. His mother and father said so. Everyone in the village said so. They grew up together on the family farm in the rolling hills of Devon. Albert only had to call Joey's name, whistle him up, hooting like an owl, and his horse would come running. Together they would ride down the deep lanes to school, gallop like the wind over candlelight meadow, trot through Bluebell Wood and along the river, where the herons lifted off and the kingfisher flashed by and the salmon leapt. They ploughed and sowed in the fields, cut the grass for hay, harvested the corn, gathered in the sheep. They worked hard, Joey and Albert, but their life was just about as perfect and happy and peaceful as it could be. And then one day, to everyone's astonishment, the church bell rang out in the village. It wasn't Sunday, and it wasn't a wedding or a funeral, and so everyone knew there was trouble, and everyone came running. "War! War!" the shout went up, and some were cheering and some were crying. "The Germans have marched into Belgium." Albert didn't know much about Germany or Belgium. All he knew was that they were faraway places across the sea. So any war, he thought, would be far away too. "It's nothing to worry about, Joey," he said, as they rode back home to the farm. "Life will go on just the same. It'll all be over soon enough. You and me, we'll be fine." But Albert was wrong. He wasn't to know how long and terrible this war would be. He wasn't to know that the army would be needing horses, all the horses they could get, horses for the cavalry, horses to pull the carts and the guns, the ammunition wagons and the ambulances. And Albert wasn't to know that soon his father would be badly in need of money to keep the farm going and feed the family. Albert wasn't down in the village on the morning the soldiers came looking for good sturdy horses to buy. His father had sent him off to market to sell some sheep. But his father was there, and he brought Joey with him without saying a word to Albert. When Albert got home, he found Joey's stable was empty, and his mother was in tears. He soon found out why, and ran all the way down to the village. But he was too late. Joey had already been sold to the army. Captain Nichols, the officer in charge, took Albert aside and tried to explain. "I'm afraid Joey belongs to the army now, but don't you worry, I'll take good care of him for you. Promise." There was nothing more Albert could do. He put his arms round Joey and made him one last faithful promise. "I'll find you, Joey," he whispered. "I will. One day you'll hear me calling you like I always do, and you'll know it's me. Listen for me, Joey. I'll find you. I promise." Back home, Albert packed his bag and said goodbye to his parents. "I shan't speak to you again, Father, not after what you've done," he said. "I may be too young, but I'm going to join up in the army. I'm going after Joey, and there's nothing you can do." Of course, his mother did all she could to stop him, but Albert's mind was made up. He found the recruiting office, where he stood as tall as he could and spoke as deeply as he could, and told the sergeant that he was 18. "You look more like 15 or 16 to me," the sergeant said. "But we need all the soldiers we can get, so you'll do." They gave Albert a uniform and a rifle, and boots that were too big for him and gave him blisters, and sent him off for training. They marched him up and down, taught him how to shoot straight and polish his buttons and boots. Finally, he went to battle in far-off France, and all the while he kept his eye out for his Joey. Every horse he saw gave Albert new hope, but none of them was like Joey. His Joey was a shining red bay with a black mane and tail. He had 4 perfectly matched white socks and a white cross on his forehead. There wasn't another horse like him. Albert told his friends all about Joey and how he was going to find him if it was the last thing he did. "Then we'll go back home to England and be happy again. You'll see." But his friends, good pals, thought his search was hopeless, and they'd tease him about it sometimes. "There's thousands of horses. You'll never find him." Albert's days as a soldier were mostly spent waiting in the trenches with the rifle fire crackling and the whine of the shells as they flew overhead, waiting to be sent up over the top of all the trenches and out across no man's land. Huddled in his dugout, he kept saying to himself, "I'll find you, Joey, I will." Sometimes he found himself shouting it out loud. When he woke up each morning, there was only one thought on his mind: to live through the day so he could find his Joey. Albert didn't know it, but his Joey was not more than a few miles away. He was a cavalry horse now, ridden by Captain Nichols. The captain had become very fond of him. He liked to draw pictures of Joey whenever he could, and he was taking good care of him, just as he had promised Albert he would. As for Joey, he too dreamed of a life back home, of happy days out in the fields with his Albert. And he too had a friend, a tall black stallion the soldiers called Topham. Topham was stabled next to him, and whenever they could, they grazed together, drank together, and galloped side by side. They were great comfort to one another. But Joey and Topham could never forget the war. Night and day the guns roared and the ground shook. There was little shelter from the wind and rain, and there was never enough food or water. Captain Nichols did his best for them, came and talked to them often, especially at night time when the shelling lit up the sky. He smoothed their necks and calmed their fears and told them all would be well. But one day their lives would change completely. It was in the first cavalry charge of the war. Captain Nichols was riding Joey, charging with the troop through the smoke and noise of battle. Topham was galloping beside them. Suddenly, Joey could feel that Captain Nichols was no longer on his back. His stirrups were swinging free. There were no other horses around him except Topham, and Joey saw that he too had lost his rider. All around them there were soldiers in grey uniforms and helmets, speaking strangely. On the ground lay so many horses, so many men. Joey and Topham were caught and taken away. Joey and Topham were in the German army now, but they weren't being used as cavalry horses anymore. They were ambulance horses, hitched up side by side to an ambulance cart filled with wounded soldiers. They hauled the cart several miles from the battlefield to a field hospital on a farm. They soon discovered that the German soldiers in their grey uniforms were just like the British soldiers in their khaki uniforms. They might speak differently, but, like the British, the Germans were tired and cold and hungry and frightened and longed to go home. Joey and Topham felt the same. The work was hard, but the two friends were always together side by side as they pulled their ambulance. And when they came back each evening to the farm near the field hospital where they were stabled, a young girl and her grandfather would come and talk to them, bringing them fresh water and sweet-smelling hay. When the summer came and the fighting moved further away, Joey and Topham were not needed so often to fetch the wounded back from the trenches. Then the little girl would ride them on the farm. They felt safe with her, but they still longed for home. Every night Joey thought of his Albert and wondered where he was. Every day he listened out for his call. But their blissful days of peace and happiness did not last for long. One autumn morning they looked out of their stable to see a troop of horse artillery coming down the dusty track. The officer in charge strode over to them and looked them up and down. Before they knew it, Joey and Topham were dragged into the farmyard and hitched up to a gun team with 4 other horses. They were war horses again, this time pulling guns. The autumn turned to winter. Day in, day out, Joey and Topham hauled guns down long roads, up rutty hills, through sinking mud. Every day was more exhausting than the last. They were driven hard, shouted and cursed at, sometimes whipped. The work and the cold and mud took their strength. Joey could see that Topham was not well. He took longer to stand up each morning and he was limping badly. But one morning they found themselves being led away from the guns by another soldier, older than the rest. He was kinder to them than the others had been. "Hello, you lovely horses," he said. "I am Friedrich Muller. Do not worry, I shall look after you as if you were my children. I have children, you know, back home in Germany. 4 of them, all girls. It's all I want, to go home to my family." And Friedrich was as good as his word. He did treat Joey and Topham like his own children. There were no more whips, no more shouting and cursing, just the gentleness and kindness of their friend Friedrich. Topham was still weak and still limping, but he was happier in his spirits now. The loads of ammunition they had to pull were not too heavy. Friedrich made sure of that. They stopped often for rest and water, and Friedrich sang to them the songs he sang to his children back home. Listening to him calmed their fears. One day they were resting in a wood. Friedrich was sitting down under a tree singing, whilst the 2 horses drank from the stream. The shelling came quite suddenly. The whole wood seemed to be exploding around them. There were fires everywhere. The horses tried to run, but Topham lost his footing and fell. Joey waited beside him, but Topham didn't get up. Friedrich tried to help him, but Topham lay still, not moving, not breathing.